Shalom, Izzy here, and welcome to our first Hebrew verses lesson. Really, it's not just a lesson, it's a study going through the Hebrew verses in the book of Exodus. Yeshua, in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, was asked what the greatest commandment was. And in response, he quoted the Shemot. He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God." So it's interesting that there are actually two verbs in the greatest commandment, and the first one isn't love. The first one is listen. There's something very profound there. You can't truly love someone unless you first listen to them and get to know them. And likewise, when it comes to our relationship with God, if we don't listen to Him, we're not really loving Him. So let's spend some quality time together with Him and with each other as disciples of Yeshua, learning from our Master, reading the Bible that Jesus Himself read, the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, and listening to God together. And I'm really excited about starting the book of, as it's called in Hebrew, Shemot. By the way, you can follow along here. You can also follow along on the website. Just go holylanguage.com/Tanakh, TANACH, and it will bring up this very text. All right, let's begin. I'm not sure if we're going to make it through the whole chapter or not. We might do a whole chapter, we might do half. There are some word studies that I want to delve into with you as we go here. So let's just begin reading and we'll see. And it's great because this is the story, and it's really fun reading stories in Hebrew. Ve'ela, and these, Shemot, are the Shem's names, B'nai, of the Bens, that's the sons or children of Israel, and that was actually the name of a guy. His other name was Yaakov, Jacob, and we're named after him. Whether you be physical Israel or spiritual Israel, so to speak, there's an invitation there to struggle and strive and wrestle, just like he did, and it's not always fun. All right, Bnei Israel, Habayim. So those who bowed, who came, Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim, so Mitzrayim is Egypt. It's interesting because it's we'll get into that later. When you see the on the end of a word like this, it's a little tricky because that can sometimes just be the feminine ending of a word or a name, right? But when you're speaking of a geographical place like this, it can indicate direction. So Mitzrayimah means towards Mitzrayim, towards Egypt. So for instance, towards Jerusalem, towards Yerushalayim would be what? Yerushalayimah. That's right. All right. Et with Yaakov. Now this is interesting because you have the Hebrew word im, which can mean with. You also have the word etzel, which means like kind of beside with. But this word here is et, the Aleph Tav, and this is one of the two ways it can function. One way, as you'll see soon, is it precedes the direct object in a sentence. So it precedes the person or thing that's getting verbed, being acted upon, so to speak, and so anyways, we just started a parallel Hebrew verses study in the Gospel of John. And of course, the opening lines there, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And we noted how in Genesis 1:1, we see the Aleph Tav, we see this word used twice. And I pointed out there that the word et literally can mean with. So there's definitely a connection there between John 1:1 and Genesis 1:1, besides the fact that they both open with the word in the beginning. So notably, in the beginning of the book of Exodus, we also see the Aleph Tav, indicating the people who went down to Egypt with Jacob. But on a deeper level, could it also be that this is a reminder of the Mashiach, and that God has always been with His people, and that the spirit of the Messiah has always been around, also has been present to God's people, and of course not just in the past but also in the present with you and me today, and even as we study, the Messiah is present with us. as we gather together across time and space with the help of technological tools like the internet and video recording. He's with us as we gather in his name as disciples of the Master to read the Bible that he read, to follow in his footsteps that way. All right, so anyways, it's a beautiful instance of the Aleph and Tav and how it's a reminder of the spirit of the Mashiach. All right, so Ish, each man, Uveito, and his bite, his house, referring to his household. Ba'u, so they came. Ruvain, that's Reuben. Shimon, Simon or Simeon. Levi, Yehuda, and Judah. Issachar, Zvulun, Zebulun, Uvinyamin, and little Benny, Benjamin. Dan, that's Dan, Naphtali, and Naphtali. Gad, Asher, and Asher. Vayi, Yehi means like it'll be, it'll happen. So Vayahi, if you have the vav, the and on the front, it flips the tense, so to speak. We don't exactly have verb tenses in Hebrew. We more have complete and incomplete action. So, but basically, that it makes the action complete. And I feel like there's some really deep metaphysical insight there, and I haven't been able to get it yet. If you have it, please let me know, because I want it. All right. Anyways, hey, this almost looks... So I'm just going to go a little bit random on you for a second. This almost looks like a little guy with like the body and his two arms and then his little tiny head. Okay, that's like if I was studying with my daughter Tirza, this is something that I would point out to her, or that she would notice first. Little people. Studying with little people is fun because you end up seeing little people in the text also. Little people just have an eye for little people. Okay, so anyways, Vayahi, with my daughter, we usually just translate this by saying and then. And that, generally speaking, that works because it's usually like telling a story. Sometimes some translations just leave this expression out. You could render it more literally like and it happened or something like that, but like we don't talk that way. So anyways, so Vayahi, and then Kol Nefesh, so Kol, all Nefesh, all the souls or all the people. Yotze, so Yatzain, going out. Interesting, because this is also the word for the Exodus, which is what the book of Exodus is about. Go figure. But here it's talking about the people who exited Yerech from the loins of Yaakov. So a very, very earthy and biological reference to Jacob's descendants as the people who came out of his loins. And I actually want to look at this word here with you for a second because it's interesting. It's used in a variety of ways actually. But firstly, let's see how many people made their exodus from Jacob's midsection. Shivim, so that's Sheva. Sheva is 7. Shivim is 70. Nafesh, no people. All right, so let's flip over to eSword. This is a handy resource that we use throughout our Hebrew Verses lessons. Of course, we have our eSword course where I show you in depth how to download it, install it, tweak the settings, do all sorts of searches, etc. So here, I'm not going to show you, I'm not going to take the time to explain everything to you. We're just going to use the thing. All right, so Exodus 1:5, the loins of Jacob. Right click on the Strong's number, do a quick search on it, and it's going to show us every place where it's used and how it's translated in the Hebrew Bible. All right, so the first times it's used, it's translated as thigh. Remember that they had this old kind of weird, if you ask me, Middle Eastern custom of, well, it would be weird to us, right? I'm sure it wasn't weird to them. It was very, very serious and maybe semi-sacred. But if you're like gonna make someone a serious promise and like swear, what would you say? Like swear an oath to them, then you would put your hand under their thigh. So it's this word. They're yerech, right? Now, you may have noticed when we moused over this before, it mentions it's from an unused root meaning to be soft. So for instance, like a soft heart, that's an expression in Hebrew. It says one of the kings of Israel, it said he had like a soft heart towards God. And I think that would be rach levav or something like that. But anyways, it's that same word. So that would be an example of like soft or tender. So I mean, is your thigh really that soft or tender? It depends where you get pinched. I remember when I was a kid, my grandpa, one time he said, "Hey, do you know what a horse bite is?" And I said, "No, what's a horse bite, Grandpa?" And he grabbed me on the inside of my thigh and he gave me a big pinch, like a big full-handed pinch. And it hurt like the dickens. He was like, "That's a horse bite." And then he laughed. So anyways, maybe you can pass on that blessing from my grandfather to the people in your life. The horse bite. If you've done the Hebrew Quest course, then you know about him. He's the one I got my couple of my Hebrew books from. All right. So, yes, the thigh can indeed be soft and tender, just like our hearts should be towards God. Now, there is this question of, is it like literally talking about like the thigh? Because the thigh is pretty big. Just put your hand under the thigh, kind of under the... With my kids, when they're translating this, we say the butt, of course, because it's just funnier. Put your hand under my butt and swear to me. But it could be, if you look at this, though, it could be a reference to something a little more sensitive. You can see there it mentions by euphemism the generative parts, which is a very polite way of referring to that. So, it's a little iffy. Where exactly were they putting their hands when they were making this serious promise? I don't know if we really want to know. All right, so anyways, where it's talking about... So in the book of Genesis, it's always, when it talks about thigh, it's talking about that, generally speaking. Jacob was limping on his thigh. So there, obviously that's not a euphemistic reference to the generative parts. But then when it's talking about the people who came out of Jacob's loins, it is more euphemistically referring to his generative parts. So now there is an interesting insight or two that we have here. Just to show you another place or two where this word is used. So if you look in Exodus chapter 25, we're going to get there. It's talking about the menorah, the lampstand, and it refers to it's this word. It's yarech. It's base. So the menorah, and remember, of course, in the book of Revelation that the menorah, the lampstick or candlestand, it's a candlestick or lampstand, yeah. It's a symbolic picture of a community of disciples of Yeshua. That's one of the mysteries in the book of Revelation. And of course, so if you want to understand that, you need to study the menorah in the book of Exodus. Anyway, so interestingly enough, the menorah has a thigh, so to speak. It has loins. It has a base, is how it's translated there. So that's notable. Because it's funny how like Hebrew is really quite earthy and not squeamish in terms of biological references. So anyways, the nation of Israel, it had its base, so to speak, in Jacob and coming out of Jacob, coming out of his body. And similarly, there's something to be said for human sexuality and how, like, of course, it's the base upon which the human race is built, but it also is it's a very deep foundation for every individual's psychological and emotional growth and health. And I think that's one of the reasons that God takes sexuality so seriously in the Torah and then in the other books, because he knows that if you mess with that, you're gonna mess with the person in some very deep and serious ways. And that's why it's something to be taken seriously, to be regarded as both powerful and dangerous, and also to be regarded as something that's holy and sacred. So anyways, we definitely see that in this correlation between the loins of Jacob here and the base of the menorah. So let's just remember that in our own individual lives and how we conduct ourselves. All right, just skip down a little bit more here. Okay, so this is interesting. The tabernacle also has a yerech. Here it's translated as the side, the north side of the tabernacle. Maybe there's something there. Similarly, the altar had a side. It's that same word. So isn't that interesting? That the loins, so to speak, are also a side. So it's a side of a person. Maybe not the whole person, but it's like it's a side of a person. Okay, I'm just gonna scroll down here. See if there's anything else worth taking note of. Gideon here had 70 sons who were his, it says here, direct descendants. So that would have been, the same idea there. They emerged from his loins. Interesting that Jacob went down with that many descendants. Oh, this is a funny one. Judges 15. He struck them ruthlessly, is how it's translated in the New American Standard, which is disappointing because the NASB is supposed to be literal, but here they just didn't translate it literally. But the King James did, and it's actually a phrase that in the King James it's he smote them hip and thigh, and that's a phrase that made its way. And I remember this when I was a kid. I used to really love Louis L'Amour's Western novels. He was a great storyteller, and they were actually pretty clean too. He had pretty good heroes. I never grew as tall as his heroes. I read pretty much every Louis L'Amour story there was. Most of his heroes were 6'2" or 3", and I only made it to 6 feet, so that's a little bit disappointing. It's funny too. Often when people meet me, they're like, "Whoa, you're tall," and so let's just get that out there right now. I'm 6 feet tall. Okay, I don't know why people think I'm like tiny or short or something. I'm not that short, but I didn't make it as big as Louis L'Amour's hero. So, anyways, in one of Louis L'Amour's stories, one of these guys mentions that his grandpappy or something used to always use that expression, smiting them hip and thigh. So I guess so. Anyways, it's a funny example of like an old Hebrew expression that made its way through Old English into English today. All right, anything else here? No, that's all. All right, now I do want to point out one interesting thing here. There is one place where this word is used, and it's used as okay. No, this is a little bit of this is an anomaly, so to speak. It's almost like the bush that was on fire but it didn't burn up. That was an anomaly. It was a paradox, and so Moses was like, I need to take a closer look. That's often true in life. Your contradictions, where you see something that causes cognitive dissonance, you need to take a closer look there. You might have a little theophany. You might all of a sudden have a holy moment, and maybe be shown where to go in life, and get your questions answered. So this is an interesting example. So here we have the word thigh. It's this word here, yerech, is translated as thigh. In the same verse, we also have another word that's translated as loins. What's going on here? There's a contender. So we're going to actually have a little look at this word too. So if we mouse over it, okay. So this word here is moten. I don't think it's ever used in the singular. I've only seen it in the plural, actually, like in the double plural. Matnaim. And I'm going to have a quick look at this word together and see how it's translated. Because here, it's weird that it's translated. It's like there are two words for loins or thighs. What's going on? So we just looked at this one word. Now we're going to look at the other one. So 4975. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here. Going to click 4975. And it's going to bring up all the places. Okay, so check this out. There's another word that's translated loins. And in fact, this is the one that is more commonly translated and used as loins. So this would more have a reference to your waist. So that other word for loins more means your thigh, or maybe it's also used euphemistically. Here, this word more means your waist. Like you put sackcloth around your waist. Have your waist, like have your belt around your waist, in the Passover story, because you're about to take off. What would be some other ways that this word is used here? All right. So Elijah girded up his loins. It's like okay. And if you've seen the way guys used to dress back in ancient times, it's like nobody wants to. They basically wore it almost looked like a big dress. So you'd have to tie that thing up so you could run. Okay, now here's an instance of the word in which it's clearly used euphemistically. So who is this cocky little Rehoboam, the son of Solomon? People come to him. They're like, "Hey, could you be a little nicer to us than your dad was?" And so, anyways, he consults with the old guys and the young guys. He ends up listening to the young guys, which was a huge mistake. And so he came back and he was even tougher on them than he said, "I'm going to be even tougher on you than my dad." And the way he said it is, "My little finger is thicker than my father's loins." So clearly he's not talking about his dad's thigh or his dad's waist there. It's a little bit crass, actually. And I'm sure it came across as crass too. And probably disrespectful of his father. So anyways, so that would be an instance in which this word also is used euphemistically. Let's see here. Anything else notable? I'm just scanning here. This is something you can do for yourself if you want to go more in depth. There's a great prayer you can pray against the bad guys. The imprecatory psalms. Those are like the psalms where he like cursed people or prayed that horrible things would happen to them. They need to write a book about that, by the way. Like there's the book of like the what's the book about Jabez? It was really trendy for a while. The prayer of Jabez. They need to like write a book about like how praying the imprecatory psalms against your enemies. And yes, surely I jest, but here's a great example. Make their loins shake continually. So next time someone cuts you off in traffic, just mutter that under your breath, okay? No, don't. Yeshua said, bless those who curse you, etc. Okay, so anyways, I think we're getting a pretty good sense of this word. So this is a little, this is interesting. It's translated heart here. So again, it's interesting. We touched briefly on this idea that human sexuality it's like, in a sense, it's foundational to who you are. It's at the base of your consciousness and your development. And so here we see something similar. It's translated as heart. So it's it's in many ways it's at the very core of a person's heart, which again is why that sexuality is treated so seriously, because it's connected with your heart. So love God with all your heart. Guard your heart, because that's where your life comes from. You can see the correlation there. Okay. Interesting. Here it's translated as body. Okay. So that gives you so again, this word here is matnaim. It's in the dual plural, and that's how it's translated. And it parallels this other word yerech, which has the sense of tender or soft, and more it means thigh, right? So when one word means loins in the sense of thigh, which is what we have here, then we have loins in the sense of waist, which is what we had there. So I think we got some insights there. Hopefully hopefully you regarded that as being worth it. Let's keep going here. Okay, so there's 70 people. V'Yosef, and Joseph, Haya, he was or he became, V'Mitzrayim, in Egypt. And there's an insight there, by the way. Joseph, he had his dream, but his dream didn't come true. He didn't become the man he was in his dream. What did it take? He became Joseph. He became who he really was in Egypt, and that involved descending into chaos, so to speak. His world was shattered, and he went through tremendous confusion, I'm sure, and cognitive dissonance when everything went south. And yet it was from that horrible milieu that Joseph became who he was. And the same can definitely be said for you and for me. And I honestly don't like that fact at all. If you've gone through that, then you may know that. If you haven't gone through that, then you will. So I'm saying that because I want you to brace yourself, and I want you to be ready so that when you go through suffering or when your world falls apart, that's an opportunity for you to become who you're called to be. So draw on who you most deeply are in the Spirit of God, and stay true to Him and to your true self, because it's necessary. All right, verse 5. Vayamat, so and muted died, Yosef, v'chol, and all Echav, his achs, his brothers, v'chol, and all Hadol, so the door, the generation, Ha-hu, that. And my daughter Tears and I always get a kick out of that. When we're like studying and translating together, we always translate that literally. So we would, if she was reading, she'd say, and v'chol Adorahu, and all the generation, that. And then we would laugh. So anyways, you might have some fun with that humor too. This word for generation, dol, it's an interesting one. I actually want to take a moment to unpack that with you also. All right, so here we are. Generation. You'll notice here, it mentions which verb it's from. We're going to look that up in a second, and it means properly quote a revolution of time. That's kind of interesting because, like, door actually means something. Door actually means something in English, and it means like it like opens in a revolving sense. Maybe it's not a completely revolving door, although we do have those. So that might be a way for you to remember the Hebrew word for generation. Like the Lador Vidor, the generations, they go around, so to speak. They come and they go in the cycle, and that's like so in a way like a door, whether it be just an opening closing door or a revolving door. It's a picture of generations. Now we're going to look briefly at two Hebrew words that are related to that. All right. So it mentioned here that it comes from the root, was it 1752? Yeah, okay, there we are, 1752. So we're going to hit Control S. Going to bring up our search box once more. Hebrew 1752 and search, and it should come up but once. Yeah, all right. So it's only used once in the Psalms and Tehillim, and it has the sense of dwelling. So he says, I'd rather stand at the threshold of the house of my God. So just like stand at the doorway than dwell in the tents of wickedness. And that word there, dwell, is this word. So of course, it would have the sense, just like a generation is temporary, it would have the sense of that. And it's like being contemporaries with the wicked. You don't want to be contemporaries with the wicked, so to speak, even if you live in the same generation. Now, there is one more way that this word is used. It's a word picture, and it'll give you a sense that that for me kind of fired up my heart a little bit. So let's go to Isaiah 30 here. I'm pretty sure it's 30 at the end of Isaiah 30. Okay, there it is. So it's this interesting kind of picture that's painted. What I want to point out to you specifically, though, is it mentions a pyre of fire. So what's a pyre? I think often, as this word is used in the Tanakh, it's used to the ancient custom of of cremation, of burning a dead body and on a pyre. And in order to do that, maybe you're familiar with that. So there would be the first layer of logs they'd all be laid down beside each other, next to each other. Then the next layer would be laid on the side of each other, but like this. And then the next layer is going to be like this. And I'll show you the word for that. The word for that is, oh, come on. There you are. Medura. So it actually comes from that word daral, to dwell together, and then it's related to this word for generation, dol. So, which is actually it's a really nice picture of a generation. It's like kind of poetic. Where did our text go here? Let's go back here. There we are. All right, so there's something there for us too. So the picture of a generation is like a whole bunch of logs laid next to each other. So they're all next to each other and they're on the same level. And then it's like the next generation is that next layer of logs that are laid crosswise. And it's interesting because often generations will do that. They'll define themselves as in contradistinction to the previous generation. You think about the 60s and 70s. And then the 80s and 90s, for instance, there's a big difference between the 70s and the 80s. So that's a perfect example. So, when one generation, all the logs go this way, and the next generation, they go the other way. They go crosswise. And so, when you do that with logs, you form a pyre. And then when you can light that up and the fire will spread. The fire will spread through the entire, sorry, I'm just going to get the camera to focus here. The fire will spread through the entire pyre of fire. So anyways, sorry, let's see if we can get this camera to focus. Okay, there we go, we're back. Anyways, so the reason I'm saying that is because this, you could do that with a campfire too. Have you ever built a campfire? I mean, there are a couple different ways of doing that. I can think of at least three. Like, some people like to have this traditional where you lay all the logs out that way because it burns for a long time. I've done a fair bit of camping up in Saskatchewan where I grew up and elsewhere, and in Israel. And you can get like a nice bed of coals that way for sure. There's also there are a couple old Indian ways, whereas we'd say in Canada First Nations, where you just take whole logs and you just put the tips in the center where they're all meeting, and then the fire is there, and then you just keep feeding the logs in, and that's the lazy way. But if you're getting up in the middle of the night and it's only a couple degrees above freezing, you don't want to be spending any more time than necessary. So that can be a handy way of doing it, and you can get a very long burning fire that way. There are also people who will do the little teepee style, But anyways, so this is the point is that this is a picture of generations. But I'm also reminded of probably the biggest promise, one of the biggest promises in the Brit Chadashah, the new covenant relationship that people can have with God. It says that the Messiah will immerse you in the Holy Spirit and in fire, in the fire of the Holy Spirit. And so, in your generation, you can come to God and he can light you up with the fire of his Holy Spirit. And you can be like a log in the pyre, so to speak, and you can light up the people next to you in your generation. And I pray that happens for you in the name of Yeshua, that you will be truly lit up with the light and the life and the love of God, and that you will spread that you'll light up the people next to you in your generation. And may that be true for each one of us. All right, so that's a little picture of generation there. Back to our text. So here Joseph died and his brothers and that whole generation. I'm going to share with you a little thing that I've been contemplating lately. This is related. So is the Messiah going to come in your lifetime? The answer for the last almost 2,000 years has been either yes or no, but he's going to come the day after your lifetime. Because, in Scripture it talks about when someone dies, it uses the imagery of falling asleep. And that was very frequent. Yeshua even would remember he walked into the room where there was that dead girl, and he was like, she didn't die, she's just sleeping. And they're all like, she's dead, she's really dead. And they even laughed at him, and so he had to put him out of the house. You remember that. And it that term was used pretty strongly, actually. Remember, Yeshua was like, our friend Lazarus he fell asleep, but I'm gonna go wake him up. And they're like, and his disciples were like, oh, that's good. If he fell asleep, it means he's gonna get better. And he's like, Lazarus is dead. It's like they didn't understand, And so there's something about sleep that's a picture of death. And one of the interesting things about sleep is you don't remember sleeping. You don't remember the point. You're not even aware of the point in time when you fall asleep. Like one moment you're there and you're lying there, I don't know, doing whatever, and then suddenly it's the next morning and you're waking up and you're like, oh, I fell asleep. I don't remember falling asleep. And how many hours elapsed? 8 hours, let's say. And you think about that, that span of time is actually pretty long. That's the equivalent of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's like a whole day's work. And you're just lying there unconscious. And so it's a really interesting picture of when a person experiences physical death. And I believe that sleep, in a way, it's like a prophecy of death, and not just of death, but of waking back up again and getting up in the future. The Techiyat HaMetim, when the dead are made alive again. The Tekumat HaMetim, when they're raised up and they stand up on their feet. So, so from the perspective of, let's say, Yeshua's first generation of disciples, he didn't come back in their lifetimes, but he came back, or he's going to come back the day after their death, because when you fall asleep, you're not aware of the passage of time the same way. Now, I'm not commenting on whether people are conscious, when they go to be with the Master, they're conscious with the Master right now. The interplay between that world and this world, there's some big metaphysical questions there. We're not going to get into that, but the big idea is it's almost like, that ties into the whole exploration of now. Like, how do you define now? Now is constantly changing. Now is entirely subjective to the individual. So it's almost like there are two ways of looking at history. There's this way of looking at history chronologically, where it's like generation, generation, generation. Even though it's kind of hard to peg exactly when one generation ended and the next generation began. It's almost like one fluid generation from Adam and Chava, from the first humans. There is that way of looking at it. But if you want to look at it from the more, that's more objectively. But if you want to look at it from the more subjective perspective of now, then all of us are alive right now in this generation, so to speak. And the Mashiach is going to come either in our lifetimes or in the day right after that. And I think that can be helpful in understanding how God can wait so long to just pull the curtain on this era of world history and just end the game, because there's a lot of suffering that happens every day. And I know something I've really wrestled with is like, how can you let the world just keep going? So that, I don't know, that's something that's helped me anyways, and maybe it would help you. And forgive me if that's kind of not, it's related to this Hebrew word and this concept of generation. But forgive me if you just want to read and you're like, Izzy, I just want to read. But there are things here that maybe I'm feeling inspired to share right now. Okay, Uvene and the sons, children of Israel, Paru, so they parad, they were fruitful, or a sense of fruitfulness has a sense of being productive, and that helps us to understand Yeshua's words about fruitfulness too. He was like, you're my disciples. I want you to be fruitful. If you stay in me and stay in my word, you're going to be fruitful. Well, that word means productive. So may you be productive this day. May you be productive every day. And may the Father show you exactly what that is to look like in your life. But it's a big deal to him, because remember Yeshua told that other story about the tree that wasn't productive, and the owner was like, I've already had this tree for 3 or 4 years and it's not being productive. Just get rid of it. And the guy who took care of the trees was like, hey, could you give it 1 more year? I'll fertilize it. I'll give it some extra special, some TLC. And if it does, if after that it's still not productive, you can get rid of the tree. That's kind of scary. It's scary that Yeshua told that story. It's like God really does expect you and me to be productive in our lives for Him. And again, what exactly that looks like between you and Him, that is a question between you and Him. So anyways, the Paru, they were fruitful. That's the first commandment also. In Hebrew, that's referred to as pru or vu, the commandment to procreate, and that is regarded as a mitzvah in Judaism also. It's interesting to see some of the questions in traditional Jewish literature about what exactly constitutes, how many kids do you have to have? Are they boys or girls or both? Things like that. Anyways, so they did that. Va'yishertzu. Okay, so the verb there is sharatz. That's one of the verbs used in the creation story for like all the bugs, basically, when they would like swarm. It's like, it means like a swarm, like a horde or a teeming mass of something. So that was the Israelites. They were swarming. It's interesting, actually. This is a strategy in the if you're familiar with the Chinese house church movement, and they have a strategy called Back to Jerusalem, and one of the strategies that's been revealed to them in their desire to take the story of Yeshua all the way from China back to the land of Israel, and through the 1040 windows, through this, so to speak, through the centers of these massive Eastern religions, is they have this strategy of swarming, which is like the idea of having lots of them. And they've definitely been blessed with that in China. All right, va'yilbu, so and they ravad, they multiplied. Va'ya'atzmu, this is an interesting word here. It's translated as they became mighty. So your atzem is your bone, and that word atzem can also atzumim can also have the sense of like fangs or claws. Because really, like, fangs and claws they're like bones. They're extensions of bones, so to speak. So this word can also have the sense of self, because when you die, the last thing that's left are your bones. It's like your very core, your self, so to speak. Excuse me. Like, there's an expression in some of the stories of the Tanakh where it says on that very day. It's also translated as on that self same day. And the expression in Hebrew is, it's like, I'm trying to remember the order. Yeah, it's ba'etzem hayom hahu. I'm pretty sure that's the expression. But it uses that word etzem to refer to like that very day, on that self same day. And so we see this word used here. It's just translated. It's kind of weak sauce how it's translated. It's just translated as they became mighty. It's translated as mighty. But now you know what it really means. Now in modern Hebrew, this word has the sense of independence. Like for instance, Independence Day in Israel is Yom HaAtzmaut. So you can hear that word etzem in there, right? Yom HaAtzmaut is Independence Day. So, as applied to a nation, it's like when a nation gets fangs and claws and it's able to fight and defend itself. It has its own military, for instance. Well, that's an independent nation. It also has this sense of self. When a nation develops its own identity, its own sense of self. So clearly, the Israelites were beginning to grow fangs and claws, so to speak. Specifically, they were developing their own identity as a people, and that is how they were mighty. And can this apply to the movement that Yeshua started? Definitely. In fact, I believe there are some very strong parallels between this historical narrative and the story of Jacob and his people going down to Egypt, and Yeshua and his people going out into the nations. Very, very clear parallels. And okay, so let's keep reading now. Okay, so they became mighty in the ways we just talked about. Be me'od. So me'od means very. So very, very much. Like remember in the creation story, it says that it was very good. It says it was tov me'od. Interestingly enough, we're also commanded to love God with all of our, where it says might, love him with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. The word might there is me'od. So here it has the sense of exceedingly. So love him like very much. Love him exceedingly. All right. Vatimale. So and was malad, and was filled. Haaretz, the land, or it's also the word for the earth. Otam, with them. Wow. 5 verses. Or how many verses was that? 7. That was rich. Let's continue. Verse 8. Vayakam. So Ankumd rose up, Melech, a king, Chadash, a new king, all honor over Mitzrayim, Egypt. All right. So here's the word with, remember, like to Egypt was Mitzrayimah. So here we just have the actual word for Egypt, Mitzrayim. You can see here the I'm kind of curious what Esword says about this. Let's have a quick look here. I'm curious about this. You'll notice that. Remember that word for like loins in the sense of waist was matnaim, and that's the dual plural ending. So Mitzrayim has that same ending. Okay, look at. It mentions it's almost like 2 Egypts, Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, interestingly enough. Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, also has the dual plural ending. So there's some kind of duality going on with Jerusalem, which is interesting in view of the idea of the earthly and the heavenly Jerusalems. Jerusalem below and Jerusalem above. All right, so there's like something similar going on with Egypt here. What's interesting also is like the Hebrew word for trouble or tribulation is tzara. So some people believe that there's a connection between the Hebrew word for Egypt and tribulation, like double trouble. And indeed, regardless of whether there is a literal linguistic connection between those 2 words, they're definitely conceptually related in the experience of the people of Israel in Egypt and also in exile in general. Okay, so let's continue here. So Asher, who lo yada, he didn't yada know, et, who didn't he know? Yosef, Joseph. Vayomer, and he, Amard, said, El to Amo, his people, Hine, look, the people of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, Rav, they're great, like numerically great. Va'atzum, and they're mighty. Remember, in that sense of like having a strong sense of self, national identity, independence, like some seriously sharp teeth and fingernails. Instead of saying fangs and claws, I said teeth and fingernails. All right, so Vatsum, Mimenu, more than us. So they're greater and mightier than us. Hava, so that means like come. Nitchak ma. All right, so chokhmah is wisdom, a chacham is a wise person, and then here we have the verb nitchak ma. So let's act wisely, lo, towards him or towards it, the people, the people of Israel. Pen, lest yilbeh, so they become even greater numerically. V'haya, and it will be. Okay, so again, you can see like how the verb is flipped. So usually haya means he was or it was or became. Remember Joseph? It says about Joseph, Yosef haya b'Mitzrayim. So he was or he became in Egypt. So here we have the vav on the front, which once again flips it. So v'haya, and it will be or it will happen. Ki, that tikrana, when will okay, we're gonna unpack this word in a second. But for now, we'll just read it. So tikrana. So when will like happen or meet? What will meet us? Milchama, war. I'm kind of curious how literally this is translated. Before we look at this Hebrew verb in a little bit of greater depth, I want to look at this with you. Okay, here it's translated in the American Standard as in the event of war. You can see here tabs for all the different versions that I have loaded. We're going to hit this magical little compare tab here, and it's going to show us, oops, wrong verse. Okay, so we're going to go down here. Click on verse 10. Okay, there. Now we're going to hit compare. Okay. Now I'm just going to see. Okay, yes. So here at Brenton, this is the translation of the Septuagint. So this is a pretty good literal translation. When war shall happen. So this verb kara here, it has the sense of happening. All right. See if there are any like literal. Okay, when there falleth out any war. So like when war befalls us, so to speak. Okay, yes, thank you. So here Young's literal also says when war happeneth. All right, so you can see very clearly here that this word kara has the sense of let's go back here now. It has the sense of happening. All right, so let's just look at this phrase again here, and then we're gonna unpack it. So v'haya, and it'll happen ki tikrana. So when kara is like when happens, milchama, war. I'm not sure whether to read to the end of the verse. You know what? Let's just talk about this right now. So this is actually a bit of an anomaly in Esword here. So let's see. So our word is right here. Kara. You can see it's 7122. So we're going to right click. We're going to do a little search on it. And you'll see where it comes up. So as you can see here, it's usually translated as meet. It means to meet. Like almost all the time. Here it has the sense of befalling. I'm afraid that harm may befall him, so I'm afraid that harm may happen to him, right? So that's interesting that, like things happening, they have or befalling have the sense of meeting you, so to speak. There are lots of times where this word is used, as you can see here. We're not going to analyze all of these, but I am going to show you something else on my phone. So there are I have an app that just, instead of showing me every instance of the word, it just shows me all the places where it just gives me all the words that it's translated with. And we're going to use that in a second. First, I'm going to show you, this is very sneaky of e-sword, because there is another meaning for this word. This word is spelled kara, kuf reish aleph, and look what happens if you search not 7122 but 7123. The word comes up again, and it's actually the same word, except here, it's a different listing because they say that it's in this case it's Aramaic. But anyways, regardless of whether, so maybe that's where it had its beginnings, but definitely in the Second Temple era, this word had the sense of, it was used as a Hebrew word, and this was the sense that it had. So take note of this here. Kara, it doesn't just mean to happen. It means, look how it's translated, to read, proclaim, shout, call aloud. Any other ways that's used? Okay, you can see how it's used there. Now, what's interesting about this word, I'm not even sure why it's not showing here, but it also is used in the Torah in the sense of calling or crying out. You know what, let's do, I have it on my app, but I'm kind of curious why eSword is being so weird about this. Nope. We just stumbled to the next word, which is partridge, kole. Oh, because a partridge calls out. Okay, that's actually related. What a kick. If you've ever heard of a partridge before, that's like a picture of a karaing. Okay, there's a way, I have another way of doing this. We can find this. This is actually the verb behind the Hebrew name for the book of Leviticus. So let's just cheat, and we're just going to go right to Leviticus 1, and I'm going to show this to you. Okay. So in Hebrew, this book is called Vayikra, and it's named after the first word. Then the Lord what? Called. So, and called the Lord to Moses, right? That's like the word order in Hebrew. And there we have our word kara. This is so weird. So look, it's the same word, but it's listed differently. So this requires some sleuth work, or you miss it. Okay, see how long it's taking to load? That's because there are a lot of instances of this word. All right, so here's our word kara again, and it doesn't mean to happen, in the sense of meeting or befalling. Here it means to call something, to call the name of something, and you see this used frequently. So this is something that God does, and then he makes us like him, and it's something that we do. Adam, so God is, calling things by names. He's using language to designate them. And then similarly, man does that. He gives names to all the animals. And then he also, Adam also gives his wife the name Chava, Eve, which is, it's very, very beautiful actually, because, she made a really big mistake there, and he responded in a positive way, and he gave her a good name. And so there's a lesson there about speaking positively and constructively into people's lives. Okay. So are you beginning to get a picture here of this big word? Kara, it has the sense of crying out or calling out. It has the sense of naming something or somebody. It has the sense of reading. It also has the sense of praying, to call on the name of the Lord, or to cry out in the name of Hashem. It's one of the words for prayer, so it means to pray. It also means to invite, if you're calling to someone, to invite them or summon them. It has that sense. And then it also has the sense, kara also has the sense of preaching and proclaiming. So it's a really big word. All right. Now let's bring all of that home to our text here. Here it has the sense of happening. War happens to the Egyptians. I believe there's something there for us. Some of us take a more active approach to life, and then some of us take a more passive approach. So if you take the active approach, it's not so much that life happens to you as you happen to life. Whereas if you take the more passive approach, then life happens to you. If you have more of a passive mindset, then you may be more fatalistic in terms of how you operate, and you may also feel like you're a victim or see yourself as a victim. So if something bad happens, instead of taking responsibility for yourself in your life, you'll say, well, look at these bad things happening, or look what this person is doing to me, etc. And definitely sometimes bad things do happen to us and they're completely out of our control. But then sometimes also we're co-creating the story. An example would be in abusive relationships. It takes two to co-create an abusive relationship. If one person decides they're not going to tango anymore and they walk away, then it's over. So, sometimes it's possible, for instance, to stay in an abusive relationship and to say, oh, poor me, I'm the victim, look at what this person is doing to me. And it's like, no, you're choosing to stay there. You're doing this to yourself. You're not the victim. You're a powerful individual and you have free choice. God has given you sovereignty. And so, take some, it's like, just see how powerful you are. And instead of seeing life as happening to you, maybe be a little more active and hopefully proactive, right? So anyways, here's the question: how do we do that? How do we take that step from a victim mentality, or from seeing ourselves as just kind of being subject to fate and to the forces that are befalling us? Well, Scripture, the word kara, it doesn't just mean to happen. Remember, it has the sense of reading, for instance. So if you want to change your future, begin by reading the Word of God, because God's Word is true, and you want that. It has the sense of praying. So if you want to change your future, then pray more and call on the name of God. It has the sense of preaching. So, don't just read the word, but preach the word, beginning with preach it to yourself. Tell a new story to yourself about yourself and your future. And as you do that, you'll find yourself telling that story to the people around you, and you will find yourself happening to the world more than the world happening to you. Now, this is one of the insights we get from this Hebrew word that has multiple meanings. It's a big one. It also has the sense of, it does have the sense of meeting, not just like, bumping into somebody, but in the sense of like the way a congregation has meetings. In Leviticus 23, where it outlines the feasts of the Lord, for instance. It says for each one of those, it says have a mikra kodesh. So kodesh is like holy, has that sense. And then mikra is, it comes from this verbal root, but here it has the sense of meeting. Have a holy meeting, a holy convocation, right? So another way that you can change your future, change your life starting right now, is stop getting together with the kinds of people that you don't want to be like, or people who maybe are not happening to the world and are just kind of like just letting the world happen to them. Start meeting with people who are going somewhere in life, who are working positively and proactively towards the experiences and relationships and whatnot that they want to have, because that energy is you're gonna start reverberating with it more, and that's a good thing. All right. So, anyways, in this case, they were like, well, if war happens to us, but it's like, well, it really this word describes two different approaches to life, and now you know what they are. All right, you know what? Let's just read to the end of this verse, and then we'll wrap it up for this Hebrew verses lesson. So, ki tikrana milchama. So if milchama karaz, it happens, venosaf, and they will yasaf, like they will add gam hu, also them. They'll go add all to sonenu, those who sanas, who hate us. V'nilcham, and the lacham, they'll wage war banu with us. Va'Allah, and they will go up, they will ascend. Min haaretz, from the land, they'll leave. And you might be familiar with that word Allah, to go up to Israel, like in the sense of immigrating to Israel. That's called aliyah. Similarly, in the synagogue on Saturday mornings, if you are given an aliyah, it means that you're invited to come up and read from the Torah. So you're going up to the Torah. Yeshua's ascension to heaven. In Hebrew, that was his aliyah. So in that case, he literally alad. He went up, min from haaretz, from the earth. He went up from the earth into heaven, from whence he will return. All right, thanks for joining me in this Hebrew verses study. I'm thankful for the presence of the Master and for his Spirit illuminating his word to us. And I pray that you will be lit up with the fire of the Ruach HaKodesh in your life, and that you will light up the people around you in this generation. And I can't wait to pick up where we left off in our second Hebrew verses study in the book of Shemot, Exodus, reading the rest of Exodus chapter 1.